All right, so today's thing is called Growing Divisions, and I'm a little off here, but I'll get there in a second. It's about the growing divisions inside the United States during this age of reform, okay? And the divisions are going to cause more reform to be necessary. And you'll see what I mean in just a second, okay? All right, so immigration in the United States goes crazy. And you don't really need to know these numbers per se. I'm not going to quiz you on the numbers, but you do need to understand that they increased big time, okay? So when they increase so much, well, why is that happening? Well, there's problems in other countries. Heck, if things weren't great, or if things were great in Ireland or in Germany, nobody would come here. Okay, why would you come to America if everything in your country was good? But if there was a war or there was a food shortage or there was something, people did everything they could to get on a boat to come to the United States. Because in the United States, this was the land of milk and honey. People believed the streets were paved in gold, right? I mean, that's not true. We know that. But in those days, people believed that the opportunity here was better than it was in their other country. Okay, so you can see what happens to the numbers by the 1850s. Almost 3 million people. That's the population of the St. Louis metropolitan area. 3 million people are coming to the United States. Okay, heck, even during the Civil War, you're going to see that people are flocking to the United States. It's crazy. Okay, so here's the thing, where do they go, right? Because this is about growing division and about reform. Well, these people, think about it. If you came to the United States, okay, and you came to New York City and you had your choice, you could go wherever you wanted. Nobody told you where you couldn't go. You weren't restricted to do anything. Okay, you could go to the South, right? You could go to Charleston, South Carolina, or Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, or Richmond, Virginia. You go there. Most of their economy is based on farming, and the labor supply on those farms were mostly slaves. Okay, well, I'm not going to go somewhere where the labor supply is working for zero because they're being forced and trapped to do this. I'm not going to go there. There's no factories in the South. There are some, but there's not a lot of factories in the South. So there's not a lot of job opportunities. But in the North, they're farming, but they're not farming cotton textiles. And it is not their main thing in the North. Okay, they also have factories. So you can go to the north and work in a factory. You're not going to make a lot of money, but you're going to have the opportunity to make money that you didn't have in your previous country. And you certainly will have the opportunity to make money that you wouldn't have if you moved to the South. Okay. So what happens is these people that come to the United States, they're moving to the north. Okay. They're going to places like Lowell, Massachusetts, or Springfield, Massachusetts, or Boston, Massachusetts, or Erie, Pennsylvania, or Buffalo, New York. I mean, they're going to all these northern cities because Cleveland, Ohio, because there's jobs there and they can go there and get jobs. Okay. And they can feed their family. That's what they want to do. All right. Now, so what happens is these millions of people go to the North. And then when we get to the Civil War in 1861, one of the big advantages of the North is that they have more people. Well, duh. They have more people because all these immigrants went to those places. And they also have more factories when the Civil War starts. And those factories are used to make things like, oh, I don't know, guns and bullets that will help win the war. Those things are pretty helpful. Okay, so the Northern is going to have that stuff built in. So, an enduring understanding, something I want you to understand as we get to the end of this, is that we're a nation of immigrants, America, that discriminates against immigrants. So in today's world, right, if you were in class, I'd say, okay, like who are immigrants you think that are being discriminated against in the United States? And you guys would say, people from Muslim countries. Okay. People from Mexico, right? Well, unfortunately, there are some people that do discriminate against them. Okay. Now, today's world is different than it was in the 1800s. In the 1800s, it couldn't really stop immigrants from coming into the country. They didn't even really try to do that. But when they got here, the immigrants were discriminated against for sure. Like they couldn't get a job because they were Irish, or they couldn't get a job because they were Germans. Okay. In our minds in 2020, it's hard to imagine that that's the case, right? Here's the other really weird thing about this. Just about every one of you that's watching this, you are a descendant of somebody that was an immigrant. I am. My grandmother, okay, came from Ireland in 1925, almost 100 years ago. Okay, she came from Ireland, right? She's an immigrant. So, and she faced some of this discrimination when she got here, not as much as they did in the 1800s because there were so many more Irish people here by then in 1925 when she showed up. But she also saw that. Now, she, as far as I can remember her, because she died like 25 years ago, she didn't discriminate against any immigrants that came here because she was an immigrant herself. But as a country, we do this. In the beginning, it was the French. Now, in this unit, it's the Irish and the Germans. Okay, and they're being discriminated against once they get here, and I'll show you why. Okay, next. All right, so here it is by the decade. You can see the numbers I was talking about earlier. Okay, there are amazing amounts of immigrants pouring into this country. Okay, just pouring into the United States. And you can see as you go through by decade on the right there, it does it by numbers. Heck, between 1901 and 1910, okay, there's 8.7 million people that come into this country. That's almost as much as the population of the entire state of Illinois today. It's crazy. Okay, that's crazy that that many people are coming here. You'll notice the only decade where there's not is the Great Depression. But even during the Great Depression, there's over 500,000 people that come to the United States. Okay, that's a crazy number, right? And then World War II is in the 1940s, keeping that number low. So, but we are a nation of immigrants. Whether we like to admit it or not, this country was built on immigrants, right? So here's a picture of what it looked like at the ports, and this is a drawing, so this isn't a real thing, but you can see when people get off these boats, like there's a huge amount of people, and this is happening on a daily basis in the 1800s. Okay, when these people get here, their culture doesn't stop with them. Okay, we have pizza in this country. Okay, which the Italians brought here. Well, the Italians made it here, but it's based on Italian tradition, right? We eat pasta. That's Italian. We have sauerkraut and bratwurst. I had bratwurst for dinner last night. That's a German thing. Okay, the potatoes that we eat come from Irish recipes. Okay, we celebrate St. Patrick's Day, which is an Irish thing. All of that culture came with them, but when it first got here, it wasn't okay. The people that were already here, they didn't like the Germans bringing bratwurst. They didn't like the Germans bringing beer, okay, and the culture behind beer. They didn't like the religion of the Germans and the Irish because that religion was different than their own religion. Okay, so that created issues, growing divisions, and then people thought we need to reform, change the people that come to this country. Remember, reform is the name of this unit. All right, so this is a guy that you don't recognize. His name is Jimmy Braddock. Some of you might remember that name, and some of you have seen this guy. Okay, this is Cinderella Man, the movie with Renee Zellweger and Russell Crowe, where he plays Jimmy Braddock. Jimmy Braddock was an Irish immigrant in the 1930s, and we're talking about the 1800s. In the 1930s, as an Irish immigrant, he faced discrimination. He couldn't get a job, so he had to become a boxer, okay, and suffered all kinds of brain damage and all kinds of other stuff. It's a great movie. Uh, that was during the 1930s, and Irish people are still facing discrimination. Okay. It's hard for you and I to see that. Today I feel like Irish people are celebrated. I'm Irish. Okay. So we don't seem to see that kind of discrimination anymore. Okay. But it went on for a long time. All right. So the established people in America, the people who are already here, didn't like the new immigrants coming into America. Remember, the new immigrants in the 1800s were Irish and German. Okay. So when they came here, they were accused of drinking too much. Probably true. Okay, they gambled, right, on sporting events. That was stuff that the Americans, if you remember Monday's lesson about the revivals, right, and the devout Christianity of people, they're not, those people, okay, are devout Christians, right? They might be Calvinists or Methodists, okay, or even Lutherans. And there are some Catholics in the United States. But when those Catholics come to the United States in large numbers, they're bringing new cultures with them. Not necessarily Catholic culture, but culture from Germany and from Ireland. Okay. By the way, I am Irish and German. Okay. So I'm Catholic, right? And that's my religion. And so the Catholics are being discriminated against during the 1800s. Okay. They liked violent sports like Jimmy Braddock. Okay. And the boxing. Right. And they were the wrong religion. So they were Catholics like me. And the Protestants, okay, that were already here, they didn't like the Catholics. Okay. Protestant, the word itself, the root of the word Protestant is protest. Protestant churches like Methodists and Lutherans and Episcopalians, right? They and Baptists, they started in protest against the Catholic Church. Now, all of them, the Catholics and the Protestants, are all Christians. They all believe in Jesus Christ. They just believe that in the worshiping in a different way, okay, and in practicing different things, right? So when those Catholics came into this country, they weren't the same religion as the Protestants that were here, and so they didn't like the things that they brought with them. The Protestants didn't. Okay, so the Irish people, okay, they came here because of something called the Blight. or the potato famine. Because in Ireland, even if you go there today, everything, breakfast, lunch, dinner, it's all potatoes. Okay, well, the blight was a bug that would eat the inside of the potato. So you could literally pick up a potato and go, and the whole thing would just go into dust because the bug would get inside the potato and eat the inside. It wouldn't eat the skin, but it would eat the inside. And so that meant that bug got into the fields, okay, into the potato fields, and the crop was destroyed. So there was no food to eat. So the people in Ireland had to leave. They had to get the heck out of there. And they flocked to New York and Boston, okay? So when they did that in 1825, the Irish people built the Erie Canal. Okay, some of the Irish people worked on the Erie Canal for 10 cents a day, and they got a pint of whiskey at the end of the day. That's what they worked for. Now, that's crazy cheap. It would be like working for $2 an hour today. Okay, so Irish people became stereotyped because they would work for very, very low wages. So the people that were over here that worked in factories, they hated the Irish people because they said the Irish people would come in here and work for lower wages and it was driving their wages down because the factory owner would say, well, the heck with you. You're making, you know, 50 cents an hour. I'm going to hire an Irish person to work for 40 cents an hour. And the Irish person thought it was great because it was better than starving to death in Ireland. So the Irish people, a lot of the last names in Ireland were like McKevely or McFarland. Okay, so since they started with Mix, the Irish became known as Dirty Mix. Okay, because they would work for cheap and they weren't well liked by the people that were already here. Okay, but by 1855, 34% of the people in New York City were Irish. So those Irish people were starting to have a political element, right? There were so many of them now that they were winning uh, political seats. Okay, so that was starting to shift some of that Irish discrimination a little bit, right? So that's New York City had that many Irish people. But when I put this up next, some of you are going to be like, "Oh, I know what that is. That's the Celtics, right? They're in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. That's the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics. Well, this isn't Shamrock, okay? This is Ireland. And the reason why Boston's basketball team is called the Celtics is because all of the Irish immigrants that came to Boston, okay? Even to this day, there's a Boston accent. People talk like this, like they've deserted the letter R. So they park the car in the garage, right? That is the brogue, which my grandma spoke with. That is the Irish influence on the English language, and in Boston, you can still hear that accent. If you went to Boston today, sometimes people talk, you can't even understand what they're saying. Okay, because there's such an influence of Irish people in Boston, including the Kennedys. Okay, President Kennedy, that we'll talk about next semester. Okay, so that's the Irish. The Germans came here for political freedom. What that means is there was a war going on in Germany. Shocking that the Germans were fighting a war. So they came here to avoid the war. Most of the Germans, when they got to the United States, they were farmers and they lived on the plains of Germany. So they came to the United States and they looked for the plains in the United States so they could farm. Okay. So Hermann, Missouri is a great example. It's about an hour and 15 minutes, okay, to the west of here, okay, outside of St. Louis. And they have all these wineries like you would have in southern Germany. They have farmland like you would have in northern Germany. It is, and for a long time they spoke German. Like everybody there spoke German. Okay, the town itself is named after Germany. Okay, German, Missouri, or Hermann, Missouri. Right. This might also look familiar to you. Okay, the Belleville Oktoberfest, which this year is canceled because of the virus, but we celebrate our German heritage here in Belleville. Belleville is a German uh, immigrant town. Okay, so the stuff that we have here and the influences that we have here uh, is like beer are a part of it. So Belleville used to be a big brewing town. There was a Stag beer distributorship, not distributorship, brewery here for a long time. Okay, it closed down probably 20 or 30 years ago. But they brewed the beer here. The reason they brewed it here is because of that German heritage. Heck, if you know Major League Baseball, Milwaukee's baseball team, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Midwest, farmland, right? They're called the Brewers. Okay, that's German influence, right? They're called the Milwaukee Brewers. So the Germans came to the Midwest. All right, so this starts something called the temperance movement, where people in the United States are like, whoa, like this has to stop. There's way too much drinking. All these Irish people and all these German people have brought in so much alcohol that we need to have a movement to stop that. Okay. That will be a future lesson, okay, that we look at. That's the reform that's needed. Okay, that's the reform that's needed. All right, so I'm going to stop right there. I'll have to clip the video.